My name is Mike Morche. I'm the Operations and Communications Director here at Wyandotte Family. As you could tell by the video, our pastors, Jeremy and Julie Gorky, are out on sabbatical. It's a well-deserved time away to get their batteries charged and enjoy some family time and do some studying for the upcoming seasons of leadership that we're going to enjoy with them when they come back in the fall. If you've been here with us the last few weeks, you'll probably recall that we've just concluded a long season of what we call flexing, which is effectively just working hard, exerting and expending energy doing what we do. And beginning this morning, we're kicking off our summer season of rest. So welcome to summer. I wore my flip-flops in honor of the rest part. Nobody's invited me to the beach yet, but I am available later if you want to stop and talk to me in the lobby. By shifting to the single gathering each Sunday through Labor Day, as Lisa mentioned, we're scaling back some of our regular programming and really just to give us an opportunity to reinvest in one another relationally. And I really want to encourage you, as Pastor Jeremy had explained to us over the last few weeks, in order to grow in our strength as a church family, we have to rest from our labors. That he talked about the stressing and flexing of muscle, and it tears down muscle fiber, and then in the rest, the actual growth in the muscle takes place. So in order for that to work for us, we've got to be intentional about what we do. We intentionally worked and had that long season through the winter and spring months of pressing and doing ministry, but resting takes some intention as well. I'm a firm believer in planning to be spontaneous, and I get a lot of ribbing about that. But I talk about it all the time. If you don't plan in your life and intentionally provide a space to catch your breath, you won't, and you just keep going and going. Who agrees with me? If you don't stop, you won't stop. And I'm a little, as I share some of my story, you'll understand I'm almost an expert at that. But at any rate, we really want to encourage you to take full advantage of the relational season of rest. Just a couple of ideas, suggestions, because again, if we're always working, we're really not good at resting. You might want to get together for lunch or coffee with somebody after the gathering. 2, you might want to seek out and meet people that you've not met before. Or maybe you know them by sight, but you've never really sat down and been relational with them. Do that. 3, you might want to get together for some kind of a form of recreation, be it out to lunch, dinner, picnic in the park, a bonfire, any of that sort of thing. But do it. I can't help. I can't stress enough. Just please do it. Use this season as an opportunity to not do the same old. It's a good thing. So during the summer rest, we're going to be enjoying the Our Story series, which is exactly what you might expect it to be. We've invited a number of nice folks to join us on Sundays to share some aspect of their personal story, God's influence in understanding how He's written their particular stories, and how that influence shaped who they are, and how they go about living in that influence in the present. I have the honor and privilege of being the first one to share a part of my story with you this week. And interestingly enough, I wasn't scheduled to speak until much later in the series. One of the other speakers had encountered some travel challenges that would have made it extremely difficult for him to get to town this weekend and still be fresh enough to bring his best effort to us on Sunday. So it would appear the change in schedule and allowing me to be first, and by virtue of the fact that we're gathering today on July 2nd, it would seem that we're exactly scheduled in the right order. Because ironically enough, today I'm here to share a part of my story entitled Being Second, or I Choose Not to Be First. So that was, that was kind of that was one of those no-brainer things. God drops little ideas in your brain, and I didn't have to think about that one real long. Although I did have to consult Marcia and make sure that I was doing that right. But I don't have a slogan for you this week, but I want to use one of my favorite verses and kind of launch from there. It's Psalm 138 and 8. The Lord will work out the plans for my life, for your faithful love, O Lord, endures forever. And that's been kind of the hallmark of my story. I thought the our story thing would be kind of an easy subject to talk about. I mean, honestly, a one-sided conversation about anything that I'm interested in or feel safe talking about that involves me and Jesus, how hard could that be, right? So I'm aware that I already have a reputation when it comes for microphones to being a little bit long-winded, but we all know that's kind of the worst-kept secret in the room. But matter of fact, it's kind of become a whole thing at staff meetings. Pastor Jeremy will ask the staff to discuss one thing or another, and then there'll be a snicker or an eye roll or two. And you know what? Even Pastor Jessica teases me about the fact that I have a special gift for being able to comment on almost any subject. She refers to me as Wyandotte family's very own answer man. I'm thinking that's a compliment. Okay, she shook her head. A lot of that just might be a symptom of getting older too. I find I ramble on a lot as I'm getting older, and I can't help it that I'm the most seasoned member of the staff, and I really have a deeper pool of fish to dip minnows from. So I am the oldest member of the staff, and for the record, it is very often hysterical when I think about the idea of working with all these incredible people and the fact that they're all about the same age as my kids or younger. It keeps me fresh, but I do occasionally feel a little bit like an old shoe, a little the worse for wear. But isn't it true? Sometimes an old shoe's the most comfortable. Those are the ones you go stomp around in the yard in and all that stuff. I like to think that that's my role or my place here at Wyandotte Family. The reason that God placed Marcia and I here, especially at this time and in this season, just to bring some experience, comfort, maybe a little extra confidence into our young and growing church. A family of Jesus followers who've been charged with a very serious responsibility of ministering to a young and revitalizing community here in Wyandotte that is in desperate need of finding and following Jesus. We need to give them an opportunity to join us in our journey. So anyway, back to my intro. I do that. So anyway, as I started thinking about the whole idea of sharing part of my story, it occurred to me, back to that old guy thing, as I'm getting older, hopefully I'm a little bit wiser, but I have a really long story. I thought, good grief, I turned 60 last month, which isn't awful, it's not over the hill, but it's a long story. It's 6 decades. And I thought, oh man, I'm going to have people nodding off. I'm going to have them snoring. Or, or worse, they're going to be playing on their phones and it'll be over. But I admit, I got a little bit nervous, and then I remembered I still have the microphone. So you're stuck. I got you. But seriously, my heart was and is to bring you something from my own journey of faith in Christ that will encourage you and help you along your way, or possibly even prompt you to start one with Him if you haven't, or simply take your own journey just a little bit more seriously. Those of you that know me hopefully also know my wife Marcia. If you haven't met her, I recommend you add that to your to-do list for this summer. We'll be married 40 years this next June. And she is, without a doubt, the very best gift God has provided in my life. We've managed to survive raising 4 kids together, 1 son, our oldest, and 3 beautiful daughters who've collaborated together with their spouses to bless us with 10 grandkids. So holiday gatherings and family dinners at our house are nothing short of perpetual motion, but we really love it. With the kids grown and navigating their own lives and households, we had planned to kind of reinvent our life together. We thought we'd do a little traveling, figure out how to be grown-ups without kids again, which was really a surprisingly big challenge. But as life has come and gone for us, it seemed God had many, many other ideas in mind that we hadn't thought of. Job and career changes, ministry changes, a new address, 2 very active dogs, and somewhere along, I guess, 2013, we got some new tenants at our house, or boarders as we affectionately call them. My 80-something-year-old parents had abandoned their retirement plans in the South and moved into a new in-laws quarters that they call their honeymoon suite we built onto our house. All of which, in one respect or another, is how God seemed to lead us here to Wyandotte family. So just a little backstory. I grew up the oldest of 4 kids, firstborn son of a firstborn son. And although my life on the surface, at least according to my siblings, seemed to come with a lot of entitlements, and it was predictably filled with an overabundant number of firsts. But not all of the firsts I came to find out were about me. I had a lot of my own firsts, like everybody does. But I discovered as I grew up and matured that I was also responsible for, or at least a major player in, a great number of firsts in the lives of the most important and influential people in my early life. Parents, grandparents, younger siblings, and so on. And it was there I came to understand and believe that I was supposed to be a responsible person. This ultimately ended up having a huge impact on who I thought I was and what I was supposed to be all about, and came with a lot of pressure and expectation to be successful and accomplished. The challenges of being a firstborn and then the first paternal grandson and great-grandson in a family of predominantly German heritage quickly became what I sensed or felt to be an endless list of expectations and requirements, also for which I was responsible. The sense of responsibility, whether it was real or imagined, didn't leave me with an overabundance of self-confidence, and for better or worse was something that I carried forward and continued to regularly experience as an adult. And don't get me wrong, there were also a great number of perks and advantages with being the number 1 son, not the least of which was developing an incredibly distinctive type A personality, which either fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, came complete with a little bit of an OCD personality trait. I know some of you are surprised to hear that, but over the course of time, I developed an exacting sense and propensity for detail, and for years it showed out in me as an almost insatiable need or desire to make sure everything in my life was perfect and exactly ordered and just so. A lot of people characterize and revere those tendencies or traits simply as somebody having the gifting for appreciating and noticing details. And someone with a reputation for being a bit of a perfectionist like I was often refer to themselves as the detail guy. I mean, that's good, right? There's nothing wrong with being a detail guy. Anyway, nobody's perfect, and it was somewhere in my 40s my kids finally came clean with me and explained to me that really those were just nice terms people use to describe control freaks. And maybe I should lighten up a little bit. But I wasn't completely convinced, but it wasn't all bad. The whole deal kept me very busy and perpetually into new and exciting things in all the varied and different aspects of my life and times. I was always hungry to learn, sharp as a razor, but also, and regrettably, I was perpetually dissatisfied and pretty focused on myself. The story gets better. It really does. Although I managed to experience and accomplish a great number of things in my life connected to this drive and focus, the ongoing tension to perform and succeed, I found created an even deeper tension within me spiritually, and it was pretty hard to navigate. You know, the life successes that you have don't do it all the time, and that there's that rumbling inside your spirit that makes you just a little sad about the fact that you can't control everything, especially if you're me. So at any rate, although I'd been raised in church and I knew a lot about God, I knew all the Bible characters pretty well. I later found out that mostly what I knew about was religion. I was raised a good Catholic and was fiercely defensive of the whole idea that my personal religion was nobody else's darn business, especially yours. And so I did what I did. My parents are kind of interesting people. They were Christ seekers during the Jesus movement of the late 60s, and of course our whole family got swept up in that, and they drug us to some unbelievable places. I had lost track of how many churches we belonged to. We bounced from one church to another. We even caravanned with a group of what they called a Jesus seeker church. Back in 68 or 69, that would use church basements spread out from Toledo, Ohio, all the way to Sarnia, Ontario, just looking to find out what it was that would make them right with God. It was really interesting. Met a lot of wild people, experienced a lot of things, but it was still pretty religious. All in all, I suspect that those experiences really became a catalyst, if you would, for my own need to seek and find Jesus. I can remember as a kid during that time in our family history having a number of very personal encounters with God, mostly during times when I was struggling with one thing or another, or was seriously interested in something that I didn't feel like I could talk to anybody about. And somewhere in my young journey, without having any really lightning bolt experience, I found myself having regular and sometimes ongoing conversations with who I now understand to be the person of the Holy Spirit. So early in my journey, I certainly had some kind of an encounter or realization that God wanted to be personally involved with me. But given my religious background, I had really no clue what that looked like. So now, if you remember what I told you a minute or so ago about the OCD stuff I struggled with, any encounter with God was certainly going to be on my terms, not His, or at least under my control, which, as you can probably imagine, set me down a road that ended me taking me down a long, long path. In retrospect, though, when I look back over 6 decades of living now behind me, there are many times that I felt like I was trapped inside some made-for-TV movie. When you line it all up, sometimes it's almost unbelievable to me, and oftentimes it seems like some of the experiences that I had were actually from somebody else's life. They just didn't connect. But for whatever reason, that was the life that God gave me. In John 15:16, another one of my favorite passages that kind of launched me or navigated me through some of this stuff that I used to kind of keep myself steady on a weekly basis, is you didn't choose me, I chose you. I appointed you to go and produce lasting fruit. And so I've kind of grabbed that as a mainstay and figure, well, if God started me down the road, I guess He can get me to the end. And so we embarked. So I've had a lot of varied and diverse experiences. Most were the result or the combination of a lot of training. Like I said, I love to learn. I wasn't afraid to try new things. And I will say now, I probably wouldn't have admitted this 20 years ago, but now there was an almost incalculable amount of grace that you'd have to measure into that as well, because some of the things that I did were positively miraculous that I survived. But my professional resume was really pretty impressive. When you loop it all out, every now and again you sit and you try and explain to yourself you're really not such a bad guy. But I all the way back to my early work career, I was a gas jockey, a light mechanic. I was a laborer. I was a musician, minister of music for a while. I trimmed trees. Lewis, are you here? I was an iron worker. I worked heavy equipment. I was a construction superintendent, general contractor. I was a master builder, real estate developer, building and facilities manager. They called me operations pastor at one place for a while. I've been a custodian, business administrator, warehouse manager, and a whole lot of other things I probably prefer not to remember at this point. But anyway, some of the endeavors were more successful than others, and there were a couple of just outright failures. But as great as some of the accomplishments were, win or lose, through every one of them, there was that ongoing and building spiritual tension that came with it. The successes and failures that grew and challenged me in different ways and the circumstances frequently left me disillusioned and kind of groping like somebody in the dark trying to find the door. There had to be another answer, and it effectively pressed me to drive even harder to accomplish bigger and better things. Even being mindful of God and His grace in my life and determining to do great things for Him and His kingdom. If you can't beat Him, join Him, right? So I was going to work for God and really do something important for Him. But it didn't fix that tension. It didn't fix the disconnect that I felt. Proverbs 16:1 says, we can make our own plans, but the Lord gives the right answer. I needed the right answer. I was failing miserably at being a child of God. How is that even possible? How do you do that? I love God. I read His Word faithfully. I served in my church. I knew grace saved me. I understood that faith in Jesus didn't produce a golden ticket or exempt me from hardship or suffering. But dude, I had received and experienced miracles in my life. And my goodness, God knew who I was. He knows me, right? How was it that I was still missing the peace, the confidence, the sense of acceptance and approval? How did I manage to miss that? And I was working hard. So I reasoned with God. I read Him my other resume. You know, the good one, the one that we tell people at church with all the Bible stuff in it. I love my wife and kids. I tithe when I can afford it. I give to missions when they ask me. I'm nice to strangers. I tip 15% at restaurants. I shoveled my neighbor's snow a couple of times. I avoid my enemies. That's right, isn't it? Anyway, I thought it was pretty impressive, but I didn't get any response. Nothing. Just silence. And just me alone with my own sense of reason and righteousness. And I thought, Lord, what am I supposed to do now? What do I do? Maybe you've been there, I don't know. Maybe you've experienced some feelings like that yourself. So I did what I knew to do. I searched to see what God had to say about it. And in James 1, 5, and 6, James clearly tells us that God said, if you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and He will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking, but when you ask Him, be sure that your faith is in God alone, and do not waver. Wow. I had to make sure that my faith was in God alone. That's pretty tough for a type A OCD, gonna get this done, get her done kind of guy. It was pretty hard. So I prayed. I learned what that word fervently means. That means, you got to sweat and you got to cry and you got to get on your hands and knees. And so I prayed with resolve and with purpose. I was not going to quit until he gave me an answer. And I wanted an answer. I wanted to know what I was supposed to do. Remember, I grew up being a supposed to guy. I had lists of duties, and I had responsibilities. I was a responsible dude. What am I supposed to do? Well, I'm relating all this to you with all the transparency that I can muster. But straight up, it was out of pure desperation to make something different happen that I finally realized that I had to let Him all the way into my life. Not just on the periphery, not just where it was comfortable. I had to let Him all the way in. Jeremy's going to love this. I had to let Him meddle. I had to let Him meddle in places that I didn't let anybody else meddle. But I wanted more of Him, and I wanted the truth. I just wanted to be able to resolve this and do something different and be successful. I wanted the discontent and the futility of all of my effort and my substance to be different. I desperately wanted and needed to make a difference in the lives of other people. Didn't know why, I just knew I needed to do it. And I guess I was finally at a place in my life where I determined I had run the race as far as I could go on my own. And so He led me to a scripture that we hear all the time. And He's led me to it several times since. I don't think you ever really get this until you're face to face with Him. But in Matthew 6:33, it says, "Seek the kingdom of God above all else and live righteously, and He will give you everything I needed." And I guess I had to come clean to the fact that I'd never let Him be that for me. I had never let Him be my all in all. So like I said, I gave Him permission to meddle and to change the nature of my character into something that He would endorse and approve. And I asked Him to change my mind and my heart. And I asked Him to instruct me and show me a better way to live. I committed to seek Him in every circumstance and situation and decision in my life. And I had finally just decided if I didn't make Him first and foremost, nothing was going to happen. So I chose to become second to His first. And it all changed. It all changed. And I don't want to blow smoke at you. It wasn't instantaneous. I guess I was a piece of work. I'm still a piece of work if you ask a few people. But I don't admit to anything except being a child of God anymore. So anyway, I thought I'd just kind of provide you with a summation of what I've learned in watching my story unfold and experience the new course that God and I embarked on together. And I guess the first thing that I really want to say to you, the most important thing that He got to me, and I'm amazed I didn't receive it, but I didn't. God loves you. He loves me. He just does. He loves us passionately and unconditionally, and He wants a relationship with us so desperately that He died for us. He moved heaven and earth to reach us. I'd say that's love. You've got to receive that. You've got to let that get inside of you. It's His nature. It has nothing to do with us. We are absolutely not part of the equation at all, aside from the fact that we are the object of His affection. And whatever we do, whoever we are, whatever we think we are supposed to do, all that stuff doesn't mean anything. Because it's His nature to love us. John 3:16, "For this is how God loved the world. He gave His one and only Son, so that everyone who believes in Him will not perish but have eternal life." God sent His Son into the world not to judge the world, but to save the world through Him. Now, I know this is a familiar verse, and we've heard it bandied about. It's used in all kinds of sporting events and entertainment, social and political conversations to describe or squeeze Christianity into a soundbite. But the impact and the immensity of the verse is something that we shouldn't be complacent about or allow to become rote in our lives. The thing that I'd like you to look at intentionally in this verse this morning is in the second line, okay? He gave. He gave. Lock it in. Had nothing to do with us. He gave. His choice, not ours. He gave. This next verse from Ephesians that I want you to look at was written by Paul, who was someone prior to crossing the line of faith into faith in belief in Jesus, believed that he could earn God's grace on his own. And he breaks down the reality of God's love for us into even more personal terms than that last verse. In Ephesians 8:8, he said, God saved you by His grace when you believed. You can't take credit for this. It's a gift from God. Again, it's from Him. It's nothing to do with us. His love for us is motivated solely by His nature of love as our Father. It's His character that's the game changer. Not mine, not yours. His character. And as our Father and as our Creator, He considers us a masterpiece. Even as messed up as we are, He still thinks we're great. We're awesome. That's hard to hear, but it's the truth. It's real. So Ephesians 8:8 goes on to tell us that salvation's not a reward for the good things we have done, so that none of us can boast about it, for we are God's masterpiece. His view of us in and through the salvation or rebirth we receive through crossing the line of faith into relationship with Jesus is a view that is one of wholeness and completeness provided entirely by God for us to simply receive. Wow. We don't have to earn it. We don't have to be the bestest or the baddest. We just have to receive it. Ephesians 8:8 goes on to say, or to conclude, that He created us anew in Christ Jesus so that we can do the good things He planned for us long ago. So becoming a new creation through this relationship with Jesus provides us with this unlimited potential to both receive His love for ourselves and to share His love for others. The incredible and matchless love that costs us nothing also provides an added benefit. We're now part of His plans to do good things for others, which transforms, for me, was awesome. It transformed my futile and pointless works in trying to earn God's grace into an opportunity to encourage others to stop trying to earn grace and simply just receive it the way I did. That's the opportunity that we have, church, when we receive that love from God and really receive it. I mean, allow it to transform us and change us. We become part of the plan. We're part of the fix. And all we have to do is just receive what He gave us. The second point kind of speaks to that I wanted to share with you. We have to choose Him. Okay, He chose us, but His love for us requires a response. I mean, it's a gift, and it's great, but like I said, we've got to receive it, right? We have to choose Him. Faith and belief in Him is our response to that love. And It's really just up to us to make the choice and choose to receive Him in His love. The action involves simply and remarkably just, yes, Lord, I believe. 1 John 5:1 tells us, everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has become a child of God. That's it. You're in. You're a son or daughter of God. That's pretty awesome. An added bonus to a positive response of faith and belief in Jesus is once again found in God's own nature. His heart's desire is to bless us and encourage us as His kids. And all of the adventures and exploits we encounter throughout the course of our individual stories, He's going to meddle. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. 1 John 5:5 says, and who can win this battle against the world? Only those that believe Jesus is the Son of God. Now I want to throw a disclaimer out before we talk about that. Don't hear what I'm not saying, please. That's like the Fast and Furious thing too. I say this a lot as well. Don't hear what I'm not saying. The faith walk with Jesus is not a guarantee against bumpy roads or stormy seas. It is, however, a guarantee of victory and triumph when it's all said and done. So no one outside a relationship with Jesus has a chance to complete their story victoriously. Think about that. So there's a lot of people running around that were just like me that think they're winning, but if they don't know Jesus, they're never going to win. They're just not going to win. And that's straight up the truth. So that leads me to point 3. And this is a big one. And this is where that whole second thing comes from. We need to share Him with others. We need to be living witnesses and testimony of His love for us. And it's got to be evidenced by the way we choose to walk and act. We need to operate our lives in a way that demonstrate and communicate the goodness and grace that He's given us. Not just for our own benefit, but really to encourage one another and encourage other people to experience the same opportunity offered to us to simply choose Him and receive His love. So, if we don't advertise, if we don't advertise that we like the product, hey, you should buy this shirt, but we don't wear it, yeah, probably nobody's going to want to buy one, right? And it's not a huge transaction, but it's an exchange. We get an opportunity to be part of the exchange, which is, in my mind, just this huge benefit. Because, again, and it might just be me because of the way that I'm wired or what have you, but to have a chance or an opportunity to help somebody else experience the kind of freedom, we're talking about freedom this morning, experience the kind of freedom and pure joy in a relationship with Christ, just simply by walking around with it, wearing it on the outside of us. It's not a big deal, right? But we're part of the exchange. We suddenly we're part of that whole thing. It's pretty awesome. So on being second, it really kind of boils down to this: we're no better than the one who sends us. And this is a subject that gets me into trouble. Probably gets us all into trouble, and is at the heart of the changes that I've personally experienced in my journey. But the real deal is this: Jesus said it straight out to His followers just before He went out to accomplish the greatest demonstration of God's love for us that mankind's ever seen. He went out and died for us to buy us out of a certain and hopelessly unredeemable destiny. Man. So he said this to His disciples in John 13:15 through 17. It says, "I've given you an example to follow. Do as I have done to you. I tell you the truth, slaves are not greater than their masters, nor is the messenger more important than the one who sends the message. Now that you know these things, God will bless you for doing them. So clearly the verse here communicates that we shouldn't be thinking of ourselves more important than Jesus. Well, that's kind of, duh. But we know that his death on the cross paid our sin debt. So, and thankfully we don't have to do that over again. He did it once and for all, so we're kind of clear of that. But the text sure seems to imply that somehow we're the messengers, and we certainly want to have God bless us, right? I mean, I do. So how's that work? We all want the blessing that comes with the relationship, right? Well, here it is, right, again, right out of Jesus' own mouth in John 15:12. Love one another in the same way that I loved you. There's no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friend. And you are my friends if you do what I command. So does he really mean we need to die for one another? Well, I can assure you he didn't mean that literally. But I can tell you from my own experiences that if you really love others, if you're really doing it right, it sometimes feels like you are. But he said he'd equip us for all the good works that he has for us to do, right? We talked about that a minute ago. So if he's for us and we're tracking in his plan for our lives, we should be good, right? But bottom line, we need to put God first. It's a no-brainer. It really is a no-brainer. But we struggle with it. We all do, because we're human beings. I don't think that's lost on God. I think by virtue of the fact that He died for us before we even knew that we needed Him, it clearly states that He understands the human condition way better than we do. And He doesn't force us to acknowledge Him or place Him in first position. He just simply asks us to consider allowing Him that place so that He's better able to care for us and love us and guide us and lead us toward the destiny and plan that He has for our lives. That doesn't seem like a big deal either, right? There's no downside to this at all. This walking with Jesus thing is not there's no bad part of this. But here's the thing, we need to prefer others to ourselves, and that's a pretty tall order. We're still human. We still want what we want. Some of us think we're pretty good at it. But to really prefer ourselves, others to ourselves, requires that same choice, that we have to choose to be second. And it's really, this is kind of, I read this after I wrote it, and I thought, oh my, this is gonna sting a couple of us. But I figured if I could take it, and I was going to hang out so you could take it with me, we'd be all right. So, but it really comes down to how do you choose to be second? Well, we don't have to always press our agendas and our opinions, right? We need to listen patiently. We need to walk with people patiently. And I got to tell you, sometimes in the wrong direction, just so that we're there to help them find their way back. That's hard. It means to live sacrificially. That's not a real popular word. But it means literally to set ourselves, our feelings, our wants, our needs, and our preferences aside and prefer someone else. Our parents, our spouses, our children, our friends, our co-workers, our boss, our supervisor, our underlings, our neighbors, our friends, our enemies, people who've wronged us. Ooh, that's a tough one. That's a really tough one. To choose to be second requires that we learn to employ the unconditional love that we've received. You might say, well, you don't know what he's done to me, or you don't know what she said about me. I get it. It's a choice. Jesus made the choice. He chose us. I can tell you, I just in my spirit, I believe that when it came down to it, if he wanted to opt out, God the Father would have been okay with it. He chose us. He chose to die in our place. He chose to provide a way for us. How can you not respond in kind? And I don't think He expects us to be perfect. We're all working on it, right? But if we make the choice to prefer others to ourselves, will it save them? Nah. Will it fix a problem? Not usually. But as Christ followers, as Christians, we're to employ and choose grace for our behavior. Again, we just heard from the Bible, a student's not above his teacher. So what I'm saying is that we need to change our minds about what's important to us and make who's important to us our biggest priority. Does that make sense? It's about consideration. It's about grace. And this is dumb stuff, but opening doors, giving way in traffic, listening instead of talking, doing it anyway simply because it's the right thing to do, and because doing good honors God, and it reveals and allows the fingerprints of Jesus on us to show to other people. We're evidence of grace, folks. We're evidence of grace. We become a fragrance or an aroma that people associate with grace, associate with God. But it's always our choice. God's cool like that. It's always up to us. And we don't always get it right. But that's grace. We get to try again another day. We get to try the next time, the next opportunity. So we swung and missed. Well, we're going to get another pitch. We're going to get another chance. Personally, some of the choices that I've had to make recently, and again, I'm just trying to be transparent. But choices like choosing to accept and love a new son-in-law because now he's your daughter's number one man and I'm not. Love you, Matt. It's stepping back from being the cool grandpa because your child's other grandpa needs to be first for a season. It's choosing to not remember the things that your parents may have said or done 50 years ago that don't matter now because they don't remember them. It's a choice. God remembers the choices and sacrifices we make, and more importantly, He recognizes them as treasures stored in heaven. The treasures in heaven are all the people that we were a blessing to, all the acts out of the response of love that we receive from God that we offer to others. Those are treasures. And the Bible tells us that God remembers all of them. He stores them all up. And I think, just personally, I think they please Him. And remember, I'm a pleaser. I'm responsible. I think they please Him because when we love one another, we look like Jesus. Isn't that great? Isn't that cool? So anyway, I choose to be second. And it was really the best choice I ever made. I would challenge you, if you're there, consider it. It's a wild ride. Fast and furious.